Hey folks, this is Mark Devine. Welcome back to the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Thanks for being here. Super appreciate it. I'm super excited to talk to our guest here, Will Ahmed, the founder of Whoop, W-H-O-O-P.
Got it.
Which is a wearable, quantified self tool, which I can't wait to learn about. I mean, I've had a love-hate relationship with these things, and maybe will make me a convert, right? I hope he does, actually. Before I get started, we were just talking about the Unbeatable Mind program. I'm on this, horse here. And I know it's my program, but I also fully believe it's one of the best programs if you're seriously committed to transformation and unlocking your 20x potential and aligning with your calling and finding your fullest potential in service in this lifetime and finding meaningful success that comes with peace of mind, non-attachment, contentment, those things that are so hard to find these days. Then Unbeatable Mind is worth checking out. So go to unbeatablemindcom or just, check out the emails or our social media on it, because people are being transformed. So it's worth looking into if you've been avoiding it or thinking you'll do it someday. So I'm telling you, it works. So check it out. Will, man, I was really enjoyed I was on a panel this morning with you.
Yeah, that was fun.
And then when I found that we were going to be interviewing you, I was really stoked. My experience with wearables. So first I tried the Aura ring. You're familiar with Aura?
Yeah.
And, the company came to me and they wanted me to be an influencer and promote it. And I really just couldn't figure out how the math would work in terms of how they were tracking my movement, because I was a functional fitness guy and I was doing high intensity training and I was doing swimming and I was, doing things like climbing things and they were just tracking like footsteps. I was like, how is that I don't do footsteps, right? I really don't. Like, I don't run anymore that much, and I do a little walking, but it's so rare. And I asked that question, and they never got back to me. And so, I took my Aura ring off, and then the battery died, and then I haven't touched it since. And then I got a Garmin Phoenix, and I thought, okay, maybe this is the answer. And I started wearing the Garmin Phoenix, and I couldn't keep it charged up. I'm this weird guy. I just don't like having to charge everything that is around me, So, and then the watch band broke. And so that was the end of the Garmin Phoenix. Although I think that had some potential, right, to at least track my sleep patterns and my heart rate. But I never really trusted the data. I don't know, And so I figured, because of all my training, that I just trust my intuition. But I think you're going to tell me that that's probably not the right path, right? Look, I could do better. Help me understand how I could do better.
First of all, not all wearables are created equal.
Okay,
so we'll start
fair
there.
enough.
To immediately address your concerns, Whoop doesn't measure steps. We measure strain. So we think steps is a silly metric.
Did you say strength or strain?
Strain.
Now, how
so
would
cardiovascular load on your body. Now let's back up for 1 second. Okay? Our mission at Whoop is to unlock human performance.
I love that.
Okay?
That's one of my missions.
So we believe every individual has an inner potential that you can tap into if you can better understand their body and their behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And we've developed...
Behaviors I get. Body, I get that too, because not many people are clued in at all.
It's very hard to measure the body, right? We have developed hardware and software and analytics to design to continuously understand the human body. Now, I got into this space personally because I was always into sports and exercise. I was playing squash while I was at Harvard, and I was captain of the team there. And I felt like
Is that a pretty intense competitive sport?
Squash.
I know that I've played a few times, and
super high intensity from a cardiovascular standpoint.
Right.
Now you'll see some stocky players, you'll see slender players, but it's start, stop.
Right.
You're a lot of lunging, running in and out of corners, and I was someone who used to overtrain every year.
Yeah,
so
I've been there.
Yeah, so you get fitter, you fall off a cliff.
Right.
And so I was fascinated by how could you prevent overtraining, right? What does it take to prevent overtraining? How can you train optimally? How does sleep fit into the mix? How does recovery fit into the mix? So I got very interested in physiology. I read something like 500 medical papers while I was in school.
No kidding.
Yeah.
In your spare time or for your courses?
A little bit of everything, man. I went down a rabbit hole. I was a government and economics concentrator, and I ended up writing a thesis around the human body. So
really, and that got passed by your committee.
So that became that became really the business plan for Whoop. And I started Whoop when I was 22 years old.
Nice.
I was a senior at Harvard. And this is like summer of 2012.
Okay.
Met my co-founder around that time, John Capitalupo. John was studying some of the hardest math classes in the country. And as it turns out, his father's a professor of exercise physiology.
Oh, no kidding.
So we had a real
interesting confluence of people coming
Yeah,
together
so we
for
had a
this.
real overlap around physiology. And John had the technical chops to do some things from an algorithm standpoint and sensing standpoint that hadn't been done before. And I had a vision for how to build a product for coaches and athletes and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So we started working together that summer, and really the next 2 years were all hardcore research and development.
Mm-hmm.
So Whoop was the first technology that was able to measure heart rate variability from the wrist accurately. We'll come back to that.
Aura, that was one of the things Aura claimed to measure.
Yeah,
and
I'm not
Aura
here to
down.
badmouth those guys.
Neither am I. I'm just saying I didn't personally trust the data.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then, beyond that, we were one of the first company to measure heart rate accurately from the wrist.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
So, the chest strap, I'm sure you've worn it before.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out there's still 10 million of those get sold a year. Whoop completely replaces a chest strap.
Mm-hmm.
And if you actually.
Does chest strap work? It
Yeah,
works,
for measuring heart rate.
For measuring heart rate, right.
For measuring heart rate. And so come 2014, 2015, we started with the tip of the pyramid in terms of athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And quite literally, like 2 of our first 100 users were people like LeBron James and Michael Phelps.
Oh, no kidding.
So,
how did you connect to them? Did you reach out to them, or they were tracking
well,
what you were doing?
the secret to getting to them is similar to the secret to getting any influential person who a lot of people want to get to, which is that you have to find someone important in that person's life who other people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And in the case of, high-profile athletes, most people know their agent or their coach, maybe their partner. Personal trainer actually spends a lot of time with that individual.
Right.
So if you're developing technology and you're wondering how do you get to a professional athlete, get the trainer to like it.
Interesting.
And so for us, I mean, look, none of this would have worked if the technology didn't deliver, right?
Right.
But we were able to get Whoop on Mike Mancias, who's LeBron's trainer, Keenan Robbins, who at the time was Michael Phelps' trainer, and they liked it, and then they put it on their athletes, right? And so at a stage where the company was pretty early, we weren't generating revenue, it was very encouraging to see athletes of that high stature wearing the product.
They can penetrate through the noise really quickly as an influencer.
Well,
that's really
I don't just mean from an influencer standpoint. I mean, that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just as you're an entrepreneur, right? You're trying to build, businesses. For me, as a young person who was told by a lot of people, hey, you're going to fail, having athletes of that level wearing the technology and saying, hey, this is interesting, hey, I'm getting benefit, those are the little bites that keep pushing you, right? When a lot of things are going wrong in those early stages.
Right.
And so from there, we started working with professional sports teams and college teams. And then, we became the official recovery wearable of the NFL Players Association. So right now we're being distributed to every player in the NFL. We were the first product approved in Major League Baseball. We're very proud to serve some Navy SEALs who wear the product. So, really high-end, high-performance athletes was the starting point of the business. And what we saw over time was more and more consumer demand. People seeing these high-profile athletes, to your point, wearing Whoop, and asking themselves, well, could this technology help me? Now, let's pause for a second and say, well, what does Whoop actually measure? So we collect a ton of data. It's a small sensor. I'm wearing it on my wrist here.
You're wearing them on the other wrist too?
Yeah, I'm testing something over here.
Oh, you're
But normally I'm just wearing one.
So there's no watch in there?
No watch.
Why did you decide to leave the watch out? Not to distract you too far, but why did you decide to do that?
First of all, we wanted it to be a passive monitor.
Okay.
So one problem I think with trackers is when they're super visible, you're paying too much attention to the data and you're losing focus.
Heisinger? No. What's the guy who said the principle is the observer changes the observed? Heisenberg or something like that.
Yeah, Heisenberg maybe.
Yeah, Heisenberg's principle, right?
It's like
if you've got
referenced
a wearable that you can test it, then you're changing the input.
Right. So one is you don't want to have information overload.
Right.
2 is that we actually serve a population that's very active, and having a screen during sports like football or basketball or soccer.
It's distracting.
It's distracting. And by the way, now you can't wear it because it's got a screen on it.
Mm-hmm.
The third answer is, from an engineering standpoint, you have to be very, very focused about how you're collecting data and what you're driving from a battery life standpoint.
Right. I got it.
The amount of data you collect, battery life, and number of features. Pick 2, not 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Got it, yeah.
You look at a product like the Apple Watch, right? Not collecting a lot of data, super high resolution screen, ton of features, right? You look at Whoop, ton of data, very specific features, right? And no screen, not a watch.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing, and this is a little bit more on the design side, we didn't want to compete with other watches.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people wear a watch that, you know, they think highly of. Other people will wear GPS watches, you know. So the second you put a screen on it, you're now competing against every single person's watch.
Right.
And, you know, we want people to wear Whoop 24/7. Mm-hmm. That's how you unlock a lot of secrets about your body, is 24/7 data. Mm-hmm. It's not just photos, it's a video, right? Mm-hmm. You want the full picture. Mm-hmm. And from that, all those reasons together is why we don't have a screen.
Right.
Now, back to the data piece. So we're collecting 100 megabytes of data on a person per day, 5 metrics 100 times per second. So in a given day, we're collecting anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 times as much data as an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. It's just an enormous amount of data, right? Mm-hmm. And yet we take all that data and we summarize it into 3 simple numbers. Mm-hmm. I like to say the more data you collect, the less data you should show to your end user. Right? You got to keep things simple too. And we summarize the world in terms of recovery, strain, and sleep. Okay? Now back to the problem with overtraining, which is where I started in all this, right?
Right.
Overtraining is a mismatch between how recovered your body is and the amount of strain you put on your body. Mm-hmm. So if your body's run down and you put a lot of strain on it, you're overreaching in that day.
Right.
If you do that for a number of days over time, you're overtraining your body. Right? So Whoop, every day, we give you a recovery score in the morning from 0 to 100%. We'll come back to talking about how we calculate that. 0 to 100%, red, yellow, green, that's telling you how ready you are for the day, right? If you have a high recovery, take on high strain. If you have a low recovery, take on less strain, mid, right? So you want to be trying to match.
And that's based upon the strain and the sleep.
Yeah, it's based on a confluence of information. Now, recovery itself is encompassing a lot of things in your life. What we're literally measuring is the quality of your sleep, heart rate variability, and resting heart rate. Generally speaking, the more quality sleep you get, the higher your heart rate variability, and the lower your resting heart rate, the more recovered your body is. I think one important thing that Whoop does that other products don't do is we baseline you all the time. So from the second you put this thing on your wrist, we're calculating your baseline. And we look at 3-day, 7-day, 30-day moving averages, because it doesn't matter so much to know a statistic in this moment. You have to understand that statistic in context. And the sleep bit of it, I mean, that for a lot of people is where they can unlock real gains. Because if you think about sleep, right, most people will say, oh, you should get 7 or 8 hours. What does that even mean, though? First of all, when you say you got 7 hours of sleep last night, what that really means is you spent 7 hours in bed. Right?
Laying down, right?
Right. You spend 7 hours in bed, depending on your sleep efficiency, maybe you get anywhere from 6.5 hours to, hell, we see some people getting 4.5, 5 hours spending 7 in bed. So that's the efficiency piece. That's just, let's start there for how many quality hours of sleep you get. Then within the hours of sleep you get, there's light, there's REM, and there's slow wave. REM and slow wave are so much more valuable on your body than light, right? So REM, as you know, is when your mind's repairing. That's when you're dreaming. So if you're listening to this and you're an executive or you're someone who has to make perform cognitively, which, by the way, every human has to do, right? You want to be getting that REM sleep every night. Separately, you've got slow wave sleep. Slow wave sleep is when you produce 95% of your body's human growth hormone. So this idea that
that happens at the first sleep cycle.
Well, it happens
the first 4 hours or so.
Well, slow wave sleep hopefully happens a number of times over the course of the night. There's this concept called sleep cycles where you go from light to REM to slow wave to awake, light to REM to slow wave to awake. And you want those cycles to happen often, but what you also want is the periods of slow wave and REM to be long.
Yes.
Right? So, people think they get stronger in the gym or they get stronger training. You actually get stronger during slow wave sleep
when you're recovering,
when your body's producing HGH and repairing itself.
Right. Interesting.
So there's a whole nother element that no one is, even looking at unless they're monitoring this stuff. And I generally say you can only really manage what you measure. Okay, so if you think sleep's important, if you agree that you're producing muscle during slow wave sleep, if you agree that, with science that says your mind's repairing during REM sleep, doesn't it make sense to try to measure those things? And then once you measure them, you can start to action against them. Right. And we can talk about that.
So I get the sleep part. That's fairly, not easy, but simple to understand.
Yeah.
And the resting heart rate is simple to understand. Heart rate variability is something that I get it, but I still don't think I completely understand.
Okay.
How it's tracked and why it's so important to recovery.
So heart rate variability is the amount of time in between successive beats of the heart. If your heart's beating at 60 beats per minute, it's actually not beating every second. This is a somewhat counterintuitive phenomenon. It might be beating 1.2 seconds, then 0.8 seconds, then 0.75 seconds, and then 1.25 seconds, right? There's all this variance in between times of beat.
That's interesting.
And the reason for that is it's this lens into your autonomic nervous system. Now, your autonomic nervous system consists of sympathetic and parasympathetic activity, right? Sympathetic's activation. So heart rate up, blood pressure up, respiration up. It's what's happening when you're stressed or you're exercising. When you inhale, that's sympathetic, right? Parasympathetic is all the opposite. Heart rate down, blood pressure down, respiration down. It's what helps you fall asleep. It's the exhale. And what you want actually is for every sympathetic to have a parasympathetic response. That's the balance.
That's interesting. I get that because I teach that from a subjective sense using breath control.
Oh, totally. Training. I'm sure you do so many things that are actually driving towards improving this relationship.
Right.
Because anything that involves mindfulness, focus, visualization, training, recovery, it all comes back to that relationship.
Correct.
And heart rate variability is the lens into that relationship, because the more in balance, sympathetic and parasympathetic, the higher your heart rate variability, right?
So
because
high heart variability is
your
not
body,
good.
High heart rate variability is really good.
It is good.
Yeah, because you want these things to be in balance.
Oh, in balance, I see.
Right? If it's all sympathetic, you have no heart rate variability, right? If it's right? If it's sympathetic, parasympathetic, so that's where the balance comes in.
So you're saying that the time between beats is affected. It's one thing when you're in a sympathetic state, and it's another thing when you're in a parasympathetic state. And so that variability shows that you've got this constant rebalancing going on between.
It's your body's ability to adapt to its environment, right? Like you want there to be a stress and a reaction, right? And that's sympathetic, parasympathetic. If your body's really stressed or under repair, it'll be sympathetic dominant typically. And that's a case where your body's not able to react as efficiently. And we're able to measure this phenomenon 24/7. But in particular, we capture heart rate variability during the last 5 minutes of your slow wave sleep. So this is where, real powerful technology is layers of technology. So we have to be able to measure slow wave sleep. We have to be able to measure you. And then we have to be able to measure heart rate variability. And then we have to know that it's during slow wave sleep in order to capture it, because that's when your body's repairing itself. So we wouldn't take heart rate variability right now, because you and I have, been doing a bunch of podcasts and drinking caffeine and whatever, right? And by the way, it might not be the best predictor of how we're going to perform. Who knows? Even though we're maybe a little sympathetic dominant right now, you and I may still perform well if we went out to Spartan right now. But I bet you if we took our heart rate variability during our slow wave sleep from last night, that would be a very powerful predictor of how we'd perform.
Interesting.
And that's what Whoop does every day.
Right. So the three numbers again are heart rate variability, sleep time or sleep
heart
quality?
Rate variability, quality of sleep, and
sleep.
Resting heart rate. Generally speaking, the lower the resting heart rate, the better, in terms of how rested or repaired your body is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a bit of a binary. Like if you're within a few beats of your baseline, that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Where we see signs of stress, overtraining, illness, psychological stress is when you see, typically 8 to 10 beats higher than your baseline.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a really fit guy. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
your resting heart rate's about 45.
Mm-hmm.
If you're at 47, it's not going to trigger much in the recovery score.
Mm-hmm.
But if we see you at 55, 57, okay, all of a sudden that's going to start to affect the algorithm.
So let's get where my mind is going is, okay, I get the watch or the Whoop. It's not a watch.
It's really a system, right?
It's system. Yeah, I get the system. Sorry, Simplify, Gumby guy. I almost knocked you out. There's a story behind that guy. I told you about. So, how do I know what it means? Like, do you have education around this, or is there a community? Like, how do I know? Okay, once I see that my resting heart rate is, let's say, is 48, and my heart availability is X, and my sleep is Y. So what? What's it telling me? If I wake up in the morning, is it going to say, Mark, you need to only do 20 minutes of high intensity training today? Or
so the way the system's designed is to live a step ahead of you. So you wake up in the morning with a recovery score, 0 to 100%, red, yellow, green, and that's telling you how prepared you are for strain. So if you have a high recovery, Whoop is going to recommend a higher strain. And if you have a low recovery, Whoop may recommend you don't even exercise at all. Mm-hmm. We're the first fitness product to tell you not to exercise, right?
That's cool. Okay.
And then over the course of the day, we're measuring strain in real time.
And how does it do that?
So it's primarily looking at first of all, your baselines. So your max heart rate, your resting heart rate, your anaerobic threshold, your heart rate variability, your age, your weight, your gender. And then it's looking at elevated periods over time. So if you spend an hour at 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate, that's going to be a much higher strain on your body than an hour at 60% of your maximum heart rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the concept. It's primarily measuring cardiovascular load.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing is,
so it's not measuring strain, let's say, from
a pure strain
traditional
standpoint,
static weightlifting where your heart rate isn't elevated for a long period of time, or maybe long, slow work like yoga, practice, or
yeah. So getting at muscular fatigue, that's more encompassed in recovery.
Is it?
So if your body is, overly strained from lifting weights, or from some kind of nagging injury or something like that, you'll actually see that reflected in your heart rate variability.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. So the strain piece of it is primarily going to be more cardiovascular. So you're right. Like things like yoga, weightlifting, you're not going to necessarily get the highest strain scores on Whoop doing that if it's low heart rate.
Right.
However, what Whoop is also good at, and this goes back to not measuring steps, but measuring strain, is you and I sitting here right now, like we're not doing any steps, zero. But we're putting stress on our body, and Whoop is measuring that. So, for example, I did a weightlifting session yesterday that was, maybe a 7 or 8 strain on my body. I went
out of what?
It's out of 21.
Out of 21.
And it gets exponentially hard to go up the scale.
Is it?
So going from an 18 to a 19 is much harder than going from a 9 to a 10, right?
Interesting.
Now, I bring this up because over the course of the day, I've done, I think this is my 6th podcast, right? You've been going at it too. A lot of talking, a lot of sympathetic, and I'm close to a 10 strain. And I haven't exercised at all. So I've done workouts that were less strain than I'm putting on my body
because your heart rate is elevated?
Yeah, it's because your heart rate's elevated, your mind's stressed, right? Your heart rate variability is probably lower throughout the day because you're activated. And so Whoop is very good at measuring that. And for people who are alphas and kind of go, or motivated people, which really ends up being a lot of the population that we serve, having data that shows you just how much you're doing to your body is really powerful. It's empowering because it can show you actually you might need to dial it back a little bit too, right? I'll give you another, and so just to close the loop on that, then at the end of the day, what Whoop does is it looks at the strain that's accumulated on your body. It looks at who you are, and it tells you how much sleep you need before you go to bed to recover for tomorrow. So again, it's trying to live a step ahead of you. So sort of 3 actionable points throughout the day.
Mm-hmm.
And look, again, there may be some days you got a low recovery and you have to go for it. There may be some days you got a high recovery and you're on a plane. Like, sure.
Yeah. At what point what's the line where it says, now I'm going to project this sleep cycle? Is it like a time, like 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock? Or
well, it depends on when you typically go to bed.
Okay.
But what we'll do is we'll look at your normal bedtime and wake time, and we'll try to base a lot of this feedback around your schedule.
Right.
So everyone has their own Whoop experience, which is in some ways quite cool.
And is it all driven by AI or by input that's, or tracking, or a combination of the both?
We have a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning that's happening in the background that's crunching your data. And the other thing that's powerful is the product gets smarter over time. I've been on Whoop for 5 years. So, a lot of the activities that I do are actually auto-detected. So I don't even have to input anything. It knows I was playing basketball, or it knows I was playing squash, or it knows I was weightlifting, right?
Interesting.
Because it's learned that about me. It's learned all my different baselines, right? Because I've been on it for a long time. Someone who's been on Whoop for 3 days is going to have a different experience than someone who's been on it for 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a quick trick pony,
mm-hmm.
but I think the more impactful thing is the longer you're on it, the more value you get out of it.
That's fascinating.
The other thing that's interesting is you'll build up your own knowledge around the data. So you'll learn more about your body just through the things that you're experiencing and looking at Whoop as a barometer, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. I ran the Boston Marathon a couple years ago. I didn't train very well for it. And I think 2 days after the marathon, I had a red recovery.
Mm-hmm.
So my body was run down afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Freeze that. Separately, the first time Whoop launched to consumers, it was like a hectic week leading up to the launch. Mm-hmm. And I had to do a ton of press. I had to rally the team. People were working all night. And sure enough, after we launched the product, for 3 or 4 days after the launch, my body was more run down than having run the marathon.
No kidding.
Right?
And the Whoop
showed me that. Right? Now, to be fair, if I wasn't wearing Whoop, I probably would be giving myself a hard time. Hey, why am I not doing more right now?
And
why am I not exercising more? But the reality was seeing that my body was crushed actually gave me, someone who's kind of a go-go person, an excuse to dial it back and to do what my body really needed, which was rest.
To slow down.
Right? Because in college I didn't have that, so I just went.
Yeah. Well, you're right. Most people do just go and sleep.
Well, the people
chronic
that you and I
deprivation
surround
is a big
ourselves
problem.
with mostly just go. Right? We're talking about still a fairly motivated
high
person.
achievers, executives, entrepreneurs.
But if you
athletes.
can take a high performer and make them 1% better every day, wow, where do they wake up in 365 days?
Right.
That's a different person.
Right. So what's next for Whoop? Just continuing to improve the product, or do you have like a product pipeline? Is there something else coming out?
Well, we've been growing in the consumer market.
Mm-hmm.
So about 15 months ago, we launched to consumers as an all-encompassing membership.
Mm-hmm.
So it includes hardware for free, software, analytics. We have a support team that you can email with to ask about your data.
You mean like a subscription?
Yeah, it's just a subscription. It's a membership.
And how does that work? Like, what's the cost on that?
Yeah, you can pay as little as $18 a month. You can sign up for as little as $30 down, depending on what kind of a plan you want.
That's innovative.
And the hardware is free, right? And look,
it's a razor blade model, right?
Our promise to you is, hey, we're going to be working for you to improve every day, every week, every month. And if you're not seeing benefits in the platform, cancel.
Right.
We're not charging you $350 up front, and you can figure out in a week whether or not that was worth it, or a month whether or not that was worth it.
Wow, I love that. So you've got
we are
you have a
fighting
lifetime value of customers that just gone through the roof, as opposed to just selling them a piece of hardware.
Right. But, you have to earn it. And so you asked, where are we going? A lot of it's fighting for that dollar, right?
Yeah.
We care as much about retaining our existing members as we do acquiring new ones.
Right.
And I think a lot of wearables have failed in that they've just focused on acquisition.
Yes.
Big distribution, big box retailers, go, go, go. Whereas we really want to have a relationship with you and help you understand your body.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is it's not just the product that you're getting when you sign up for Whoop is going to look different in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months, because we're going to keep coming out with new features.
And what happens if you change the hardware? If you're a subscriber,
it's part of the subscription.
You get
you just get new hardware as part of the subscription.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a totally different model.
And how do you have an app or some way that the Whoop tribe can be engaged, or
all this data
feel the extended community effect?
All this data goes directly from the Whoop strap to your phone to the cloud. We're on both iOS and Android. And there's a big community focus that's starting, right? We're just now enabling the ability to create teams. So you can have all of your friends on it, or your coworkers, or people that you're aspiring to be a better version of, right? And you're trying to beat. We're working on a lot of different social networking, creating the ability to follow other people on Whoop, follow professional athletes, follow Mark, who's this expert on training and pushing his body. And so, we want to empower people who are influential around health and fitness to also explain how they're doing it. What makes them recover? What makes them sleep better? What makes them train effectively? Right. So a lot of that is starting to connect the dots within our community as well.
That's cool. So I'd love to shift focus, from the technology and Whoop itself to you as a young CEO, who's taken a lot of money into his company and has a lot of forces now, like pushing and prodding and probably cajoling, vision, direction, profit. How's that going for you, right? Do you enjoy the position of CEO now that the early entrepreneurial stage stuff is starting to move into the rearview mirror, or what's that like for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, I'm incredibly grateful, right? I mean, I started this thing out of a dorm room when I was 22 years old. And, today I've got 80 employees that are all marching to the drum of let's unlock human performance. And
that's cool.
We get to work with the highest performers at every level, professional athletes, Fortune 500 CEOs, Navy SEALs. It's just an incredible population of people on Whoop that I feel incredibly proud to get to try to serve every day. So I think first and foremost, it's it's trying to have a level of humility about the people that we work with, and also that I've got a team that I'm proud to say is a lot smarter than I am. I've tried to really build a team that complements one another and has that same drive. One thing that served me well is looking for people that have a high intensity and a high humility.
I love that. Yeah.
And what you typically see is if you find someone with high intensity, they're lower humility. And if you find someone who's lower intensity, they're higher humility. Right. So high intensity, high humility, that's my favorite combination.
How did you find those people? How do they find you?
Well, originally, I don't know if I would cognitively recognize I was looking for them. And of course, there's trial and error, right? We've had employees quit. We've had to fire employees. So you learn as you go. You can't pretend to get all this stuff right out of the gates. But what I realized in all the team members I valued was that combination of intensity and humility. Because what happens is in your small organization, and you know this incredibly well, a small organization where you have individuals representing entire departments, you'll be in a meeting which is like, how are we going to send data from a Whoop strap to an iPhone? Right. Fairly simple question, a lot of complex answers, right? And you've got an iOS engineer in there, an Android engineer, a marketer, a product designer, a firmware engineer, and a hardware designer. And they all come at it from their own sort of self-centered point of view. Right. And that's fine. But what happens is there's a natural collision, right? And what you want is ultimately for that group of people to come up with the best answer for the organization, for the team, and not who came up with the right answer.
Right. And we're not to feel put down, denigrated, or less than if your answer isn't the one that's selected.
Right. And so that's where I found the humility piece plays a huge role. Right. And the other benefit of that is when you create an environment in which people are comfortable challenging each other, but ultimately looking for the best solutions, you create an idea meritocracy. Right. In an idea meritocracy, the best ideas win. Right. And it doesn't matter if you're the intern or VP of what, your idea can come to the top.
Yeah, I love that.
And so that's quite powerful.
Have you been influenced by Ray Dalio's work at all?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of that I read, I read in his book. I realized that we were doing some of it, and, I think, look, everyone's got different management styles.
Right.
I think his, in my opinion, goes too far.
Yeah.
In that you're living
Pretty
in effectively a totalitarian state, right? I think you
Right.
would admit to that.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And you can flat out just say to someone they're a moron.
And that might be a function of the size of his organization too.
Yeah.
Right. 80 people versus thousands is going to be different.
Sure, but he built it when he was at 80 people the same way.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
all of these things sort of build on themselves.
Right.
And, I don't think you need to make people cry
Right.
to have a high performing organization.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a line there. I think the other thing is trying to empower people when you bring them onto your team as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I've really tried to focus on is how do you identify great people versus write a job description and find someone?
Yeah. And let the people define the role where they're best suited. And that'll unlock their potential.
In some ways, I think I was too young and naive to know any better in that I just would try to meet with interesting people and then recruit them to Whoop rather than have this sort of concept of what a team looks like. Oh, I need a VP of this and a VP of this and a VP of this, and go out and hire all these VPs. And then there's this collision because you didn't realize how they'd work together. Whereas what I like is you find a great person and then they evolve in the role and you've got a moving jigsaw puzzle and then you bring in the people to support them.
No, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah. I think like the investor piece of it, that's something I've just gotten comfortable with time. You recognize that you're going to find investors who believe in the same vision as you do. And those are the right investors for your business.
Right.
And you're going to find investors who think you're an idiot. And that's fine too.
They're not the right investors though.
And they're not the right investors for your business, right? So you want to find people who you have alignment with.
Right. Do you own a majority of the company still?
Well, we don't talk much about the capital structure and those sorts of things publicly, but I think the important thing for me is that it's an organization where people feel empowered. It's a great cause, and we've made our shareholders happy because the enterprise value of the business continues to grow, which is of course important.
Do you look toward a liquidity event or an IPO someday, or are you not thinking about it? I have a
fiduciary responsibility to deliver a return to my investors, so I take that seriously. Yeah. Whether Whoop becomes a very important strategic piece for another company or whether we go public remains to be seen. I think that the lane around human performance, really this market, it's a new market. Just
stay focused and don't worry. Let that stuff will take care of itself.
It's a new market that we're trying to create and to own, which is human performance. And I think that is an opportunity to build a standalone business.
I agree.
But along the way, you see what happens.
Right. What are your daily rituals that keep you healthy, balanced, sane? Besides checking your Whoop in the morning and seeing what your scores are.
Well, Whoop does help.
Yeah.
Probably one of the most important things for me has been Transcendental Meditation.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I started doing that about 4, maybe even 5 years ago.
Good for you. Yeah.
Early stage in the business, and it's often like a point of crisis in your life leads to a great outcome. And for me, I didn't feel like I was adapting to managing people well. I felt like I was strung out. I wasn't sleeping. Probably too much caffeine during the day. Maybe a little too much alcohol at the end of the day. Like it was just all
been there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I took this Transcendental Meditation course, which I think cost like $900 or something, which seemed like a lot for a 4-day class, but some of the best money I've ever spent.
I bet,
and so I do it 22 minutes every morning.
Good for you.
Changed my life. I think it's a superpower, frankly.
Yeah.
Especially for people again who are go and need to find that balance. For me, I've found it actually helps me look at myself in the third person at points throughout the day.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of see myself doing something before I do it.
Yeah.
Whereas the more immature version of me as an entrepreneur or CEO, it was very reactive. Right. Something would come out of my mouth and then I'd hear it.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas now I feel like I can hear myself saying, "Oh, Will's getting angry," or "Will's impatient," or and as a result, you're able to be proactive about the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, your emotions, which, to be fair, as you grow, I think as a manager or someone who's overseeing people becomes more and more important.
For sure.
You can't be
you can't be dropping little hand grenades all over the place.
Yeah, you can't be a wild card. And so that for me has been an absolute life changer.
That's so cool. I'm so stoked you say that. I mean, I've been banging the drum beat for a morning ritual that includes, meditation. And, I think TM is awesome. It's mantra meditation. We leverage mantra in my Unveil Mind program. We start with the breath. We get people use the breath to get the physiology back under control and to calm the space of the mind. And then we use kind of a witnessing mindfulness practice to begin to create this metacognition that you're talking about, the third party witnessing. And then we use mantra to stabilize your mind and to concentrate it so that you can focus better during the day and be non-reactive. So it's like a 3-part process that we teach. We teach each part individually, but then they all become one 20-minute practice.
Interesting. And you like 20 minutes too?
20 minutes is a magic number, I think. A lot of people say, why not 40? Some meditation teachers will say you should do 40 minutes or 45 minutes twice a day. And people just don't have the time for that. And so what we say, Will, is 20 minutes is your minimum, first of all, 5 minutes is your minimum viable dose if you're starting, because most people just need to prove it to yourself. And then 20 minutes, once you prove it to yourself and it becomes a non-negotiable game changer like you experience, 20 minutes is your dose every morning for you to win in your mind before you step foot into the battle of your day. But the key is consistency. Every single day. And then during the day, you can do what we call spot drills, and that'll add to your accrued time, your accrued mental training time. It could be like, I'm getting stressed, or I just finished a board meeting. I go back to my office, I close the door, and I do 10 rounds of deep breathing, or I do 5 sun salutations, or I do 5 minutes of TM. And then there's another 5 minutes you add to your bank.
Sure.
And so those are all cumulative, like training time of mental training or inner domain training is cumulative effect and consistency of effect.
Yeah,
consistency of effort.
I agree that doing something versus nothing is definitely good. I think, though, that for people listening to this who want to start with 5 minutes because they're afraid of 20, I reject that a little bit, because I know personally if I had started with 5, I don't know if I ever would have built the practice that I built.
That's a fair point.
I think part of it is struggling with it. Like sit still for 20 minutes and realize how you're dealing with that, right? And I don't even know if I would have understood really what meditation was if it was just 5 minutes. Whereas in the beginning, 20 minutes felt like this eternity, right? And you'd almost come out like a little lightheaded because it was like such a new feeling. Whereas now it's like that, right? And you kind of, your eyes open exactly at 22 minutes. And it's such a cool, weird phenomenon. That's awesome. You know, like I truly felt I have felt my brain change from it.
Yeah. I started Zen training. So Zen was basically concentration training.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I called it concentration camp.
How does that work?
Well, the practice was, so this happened. The reason I brought it up is I started it when I was 20.
Oh, nice.
And so my brain was still developing. And so it was one of I think it's the biggest gift I could have ever given myself, was to stumble into a martial arts studio where the martial arts master who created the whole style, he had hundreds of thousands of students around the world. It's called Sato. He was actually a Zen master teaching Zen through the martial arts. So we practiced for a few minutes before and after each session, but then 45-minute sits every Thursday night. And I went to them religiously. And then we'd go to the Zen Mountain Monastery in Woodstock, New York, twice a year for a long weekend.
Oh, cool.
Session, which is sitting with the monks.
Now describe what you did in the 45 minutes.
So the 45 minutes for basic training essentially was you're sitting on the little Zazen bench. Inhale, exhale. So there was a breath practice, but it was inhale.
Through your nose or?
Inhale through the nose. Inhale's always nostril breathing, right? Inhale, exhale, count 1. Do nothing else. That's it. Inhale, exhale, count 2. Inhale, exhale, count 3. Try to get to 10. As soon as you...
To be clear, once you've exhaled, you're then counting to 3.
Yep.
Okay.
So the inhale and the exhale, one cycle is a count. And so, there was no instruction on how you count. Like it could be an internal auditory. It could be like you could visualize the one. I tried them all. The biggest point here was that is your object of concentration. Just like with TM, your mantra is your object of concentration. It's just one thing. That's all you have to do. You put your mind there. You put your mind on the count with the boot camp Zen. When you notice that you're not doing that, your mind is flitted off to something else, then the punishment for Zen, start over, go back to 0. So the beginner will like go to 10 and be like, I made it to 10, but they've been thinking the whole time. And so, the part of the feedback mechanism from the Zen master was, let's be clear about this. Were you thinking a little bit about this? Was there imagery, and how, starting to get the individual to understand how your mind actually works, and that there's a lot of ways that it thinks, and it's very tricky, right? And you can still inhale, exhale, and count to 10 while your mind is doing 5 other things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so to begin to realize that, holy shit, I can barely get past 1. I mean, most people, if they're honest, can barely get past 1 in this process without their mind flitting off to something else.
And so how high could you get?
It took me almost a year to be able to get consistently between 6 and 10 before my mind bounced. So, believe it or not.
So literally just getting to 6.
Just getting to 6.
And to be clear, you go inhale, exhale through the nose, and you just count 1.
Right.
Inhale, exhale, 2.
2.
Inhale, exhale, 3.
Right.
That's so interesting.
I kid you not. So getting to 6 was only like maybe a minute.
Probably less even, right?
Probably less, but we're inhaling us so slow. So it's like our SEAL tactical breathing is 5 count in. So you're literally like 1, 2, 3, 4,
okay,
5.
fine. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So.
And what did you find that did for the rest of your life?
It was unbelievable.
Yeah,
it was a game changer.
Because that's the benefit to all this stuff that people underestimate.
Right.
It's not actually the thing in the moment.
It's not right. The practice just leads your mind into itself. And then more and more, here's what happened to me, Will. I was able to identify more and more quickly when my mind started to spin out and wander. And so I was able to nail it. And I was able to bring my mind, when I was wandering, I was able to bring it back quicker and quicker. So I was noticing when I wandered quicker. When I was wandering, I would notice quicker that I was wandering. So I was shortening the time that I wandered.
Yeah.
And the flip side to that, I was able to sustain my concentration power for longer periods of time until I could consistently get to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. When I got there, so that 9 months to a year of training, this is why, like in my training, I'm like, this is not, there's no secret weapon. There's no magic pill. This takes work. It takes work, but it can be very joyful once you just get through the first phase of resistance, start getting the feedback. And the feedback I was getting was, even though I would sit for 45 minutes and consistently struggling just to make it to 10, by the end of the session, I was feeling amazing. And when I left the studio, it was in New York City on 23rd Street. When I left the dojo and went out into the street, I felt like I was in the Matrix, like there was this bubble around me and everything was moving. Everyone else is moving so fast. And I was just like almost floating toward the subway. And I felt like this rich texture, kind of the description that Jamie Wheel puts in Stealing Fire about what does it feel like to be in a flow state. I was in a total flow state, like this really rich experience where time, really could be what I wanted it to be.
Now, do you
so
think
that's what I experienced. And
it's epic.
That was kind of just it happening to me. And the more I practiced, the more I could take control of that process and make it happen to myself on demand. Cool. Yeah. And so that included being able to perceive when I was about to become reactionary and to zap that thought or the reaction, just like you were talking about. And it also is what led me from following the path to be a business guy, a CPA,
to finding your calling,
to finding my calling. Because I created all that. I was working on the inner domain and I was opening up the space for my calling to be revealed to me, for my spirit to talk to me, however you want to language that. It's profound. Everyone listening to this, they know this is my drum beat, but this training, it doesn't matter. It's going to be something a little bit different because every individual, like, as you know, just with the Whoop is different. So some people are going to be really drawn to the breath practice. Some people are really going to be drawn to mindfulness. Some people to TM or something like that. The point is to start with something. But there is, the ancients would teach that if you're not physiologically in balance, then no training is going to land. It's going to be very, very hard. It's the biggest obstacle to the Westerner for meditation is that their body-mind system is out of balance. And so they're agitated. They're in a sympathetic state. When you sit down to try to meditate in a sympathetic state, it's really, really hard. Really hard. So you got to you got to exercise, you got to sleep, you got to do the whoop, you got to get the heart rate variability, box breathing, and of course, aside from the fueling, sleep and stuff, that's all really important. Breathing is the most powerful way to get your body back into homeostatic balance.
And by the way, the most underrated.
Yes.
No one's talking about breathing.
Yeah.
I mean,
except for us.
Sure, in our circles,
right,
maybe,
our circles,
but like
but not at
the pop culture level, it doesn't exist, and it's so fundamental.
It is.
And now that I've gotten into meditation, like even listening to you describing this Zen practice, I'm like excited to go try that, because I think it's like you want to level up.
Right.
Once you start to understand the impact that breath work can have on your body and on your mind, you want to unlock new secrets.
For sure. I mean, I've been studying yoga for years and also Tibetan meditation. And there is a progression, and it was personalized. The masters would personalize it to each student. And
based on what?
Based upon the quality of the nature of their mind, which was usually like how good a job they'd done at eradicating negative qualities or negative tendencies. And there was a long period of preparation before you did any more advanced practices. Now, that period of preparation is a lot like what we're doing. Breath control training, physical exercise, dialing your sleep and diet, beginning the basic processes of concentrating the mind. And then once you got those taken care of, then you began the more advanced training, which largely included visualization techniques and chakra cleansing techniques, and you know what I mean?
Well, I could ask you questions.
Really
about this
fascinating
forever,
stuff. And then that's why they were able to accrue such intense mental powers. And you read about all these crazy accounts of like superhuman powers. It's because they were training 24 hours a day practically sometimes for 40 years. And we can't, in the West, we're like, who's going to do that? We don't have the time. So at least we can do those fundamentals. And it'll dramatically improve the quality of our lives.
No, I love that.
Anyways. So when you sell your company, I'll sell mine. We'll go to like train in India.
We'll go
just
hang
in
out
a cave, right?
In India. That'd be awesome, man.
I keep threatening to do that.
Yeah,
in fact, my autoresponder, like if you email me, my autoresponder says, something to the effect of, thanks for reaching out, but due to the constant email distractions, I've decided to cut off email. And by the way, I'm actually in a cave right now in the Himalayas. And so you can reach me by carrier pigeon only. However, because I've trained my carrier pigeons in Unbeatable Mind, they can reach me in 2 days. But if you need a quicker response, email info@Unbeatable Mind. It's like a veiled threat that someday that's actually going to happen.
I go back and forth with wondering if the purpose of meditation is to help prepare you for the rest of your life, or if meditation is where you actually just want to be. It's right. Funny because that's the moment where you go become like a Buddhist, Tibetan monk or something. The Tibetans
would say that meditation is to prepare you for death, but what they really mean is death could be right now, and so pay attention right now, because the next moment is optional, right? You don't know if it's coming. To be realistic, right? We could both drop dead. We could lightning bolt could come in. The whole world could end. Who knows?
It's cold in Lake Tahoe.
It is, right? So
about to get cold.
Prepare for that event or eventuality right now, and in doing so, it makes this moment extremely important. Like the most important moment in our lives right now is this moment. And the Buddha would say you can find enlightenment in a single breath if you're paying attention. So that's what meditation is for, in my opinion. And yes, it affects everything in your life and it becomes life, but it doesn't mean we also don't live our lives.
So what's your recommendation to me? I'm, trying to figure all this stuff out.
If TM is working, we could have a deeper conversation afterwards. TM's working for you. It's a beautiful practice. I would only add like a breath practice to the beginning of that, which will help stabilize your mind quicker so your TM can go deeper. And then I would add a visualization practice after that. And this is what I teach. Because all creativity, and you know this from creating Whoop, because you created it in your mind first. All creativity, the entire future of our life, our personal lives, is going to be either created by you through your imagery, or it's just going to happen to you because of someone else's image or view of what's supposed to happen. So I think the most powerful and important work is in the field of imagery, visualization, and learning how to create, practice, and empower a vision for our individual futures, and then our team, our organizations, and then our culture. And as we get more and more people who do that, create a positive image of the future infused with love and trust and respect, that's what's going to transform culture. So breath.
Yeah, that's healthy.
Mantra, visualization. And you could do that. Maybe it would only add a few minutes to your practice.
I love that. Yeah, I think about visualization a lot, although I don't know the extent to which I actually practice it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've realized that there's no stage that Whoop has gotten to that I didn't expect Whoop to get to or envision it getting to.
Yeah, so you're doing it.
So in some ways, I am visualizing things.
Right.
However, I don't have...
It's not a practice.
I don't have a true practice. It's more just this little voice in my head that's like, rah, rah.
Yeah.
You know, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Moving the goalpost, so to speak.
Right. Well, I just think it's really powerful if you and then your team can see the same things and then practice that vision. And then, you know, you take that, and now the idea of meritocracy is working within the mental construct where everyone's seeing the same outcomes. Might be slightly very different variations of those outcomes, but it's like that is a powerful vision. So like, you know, maybe someday we'll be part of another company, or maybe someday we'll go public, or, you know, it takes the maybes out. Decide what it is. First, you have to go inside and look into the future and see what that looks like. One of the tools that we use for that is we call Future Me visualization, where we have our students create a mental structure to do their mental training in. It makes sense. Like, you know, if we just trained randomly, you know, in our bedroom or out in the park every day, you'd get fit. But if you have a coach in a gym that you go to, you'll get more fit. And so this is like a mind gym, a mental place. And then in that mind gym, we have a place to do very specialized work. And one of them is like this field where you go meet a future version of yourself. And you ask for insight or feedback, or am I on the right track, or show me the potential for Whoop. You know, where am I going with this thing? And you get feedback. It's really quite profound, actually. And so what I'm suggesting is you could actually see now what the future of Whoop is. So you don't have to wonder whether you're going to align with a strategic partner and sell to a company like Apple or whoever, or whether you're going to go public or maybe stay private and just serve hundreds of millions of people as a private organization in a massive tribe. Figure that out, visualize it, see it, and when you get the sense of certainty, I'll give you a quick example, and then we're going on a random, but because of my experience with Zen, and I started to get this growing sense of unease that I'd chosen the wrong path. You know, I wasn't going to quit my MBA and CPA.
And what stage is this in your life?
This is when I was in my early 20s, and I'd started Zen, and I went to New York from Colgate to be, you know, for the job, but to get my MBA. I went to Stern School of Business at NYU to become a CPA, then to get into finance or something, and maybe make a ton of money, and then go back and run the family business, which is in upstate New York. That was my programming. That was my story. You know, we talked about the power of story on the podcast this morning, or the panel. And it was the Zen meditation that showed me that story was flawed. It wasn't my story. But it didn't show me right away what my true story was. I had to ask better questions. I had to visualize it. And I started to visualize myself not doing what I was doing, but doing other things that were kind of inspiring to me, or I thought I could do, or I thought were, you know, where I was being drawn toward. And I went through a number of options, or I visualized myself as a fighter pilot. I visualized myself, you know, just being an adventurer, traveling around the world, and I visualized myself working on an oil rig as a roughneck. And none of them, I didn't get any hit. The visualization didn't land with me. It just didn't feel right. But when I visualized myself as a special operator, a military spec ops guy, going through this gritty training and leading people in dangerous situations, I just felt this sense of joy, or this is, that's it, a strong yes. So then when I started to take that seriously, I didn't even know about the SEALs. I started to take that seriously. One night I was walking home from work or the dojo, I can't remember, and I came across a Navy recruiting office, and on the outside window was a poster, and didn't say anything about the SEALs, but the title was "Be Someone Special," which caught my attention. I didn't feel special as a CPA, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Although God bless all you CPAs out there, it's important work. It wasn't for me. And it was a bunch of SEALs doing SEAL stuff, jumping out of airplanes and locking out of submarines and hiding in a sniper hide. And I was like, holy shit, that's it. So then, to cut the story short, I went through the whole process, to be an officer. And, of course, they were saying, don't get your hopes up. I was going to go through officer candidate school. Most officers, there's only 20 or a year or so who come into the SEALs, come from the Naval Academy or ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps. They take 1, maybe 2 through officer candidate, which are civilians like me. And it's statistically becoming an astronaut. You know what I mean? I said, okay, well, I'm applying. This is my path. And so every day I visualized it. I visualized myself as a SEAL. I visualized myself just crushing the training.
And how long was that practice of visualization?
As a year and a half.
In the moment.
Well, it was about what I described earlier, where I sat down on my bench and I would do my breathing practice.
Okay, so it was part of the breathing.
About 20 minutes. But the breathing was always part of it, because it calmed me down and drew me inward.
Yeah.
The breath takes you inward. It's like your bridge. You walk.
It's inspiring, man. I'm going to dial this in, Yeah. It just seems like it's so... because what you're saying, which I love, is... hey, you're introducing something that's another 5 minutes in your day.
Yes, nothing.
But look at this massive impact it had on your life.
Right.
I mean, that's what people listening to this should take.
And it doesn't even have to be 5 minutes. It could be just the last 5 minutes. Just drop the mantra and click in the visualization instead. Yeah.
And I wonder actually if someone could actually see what my TM practice was in my brain, how much it would look like. Because I realize I'm drifting away from the mantra all the time and thinking about different things. What I love so much about TM, for those of you unfamiliar, you're repeating a mantra over and over again, and then thoughts come in, and you can choose to pay attention to them, or you can repeat the mantra and push them out. So you create this selection process in your brain of what you want to pay attention to, which is...
you're curating the quality content.
Yeah, so that becomes the filter through which you then hopefully approach life.
Right.
I find that actually a lot of the time, I am stopping to listen to the thoughts that come through my brain.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way to...
But I realize now, the more I'm talking about this, that the days where I feel more overwhelmed, the more important it is for me to go back to the mantra. That probably says something too, where you want to filter your brain more if you're feeling some kind of anxiety. I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, I think...
I would almost like to me, they're separate things. There is a very powerful and there's a strong reason to contemplate, which is what you're doing.
Yeah.
Contemplating built from the practice of mantra, or on top of the practice of mantra, is extraordinarily powerful, because you use the mantra to get to that state where your mind is very receptive, very open into what we call the perceiving mind, and out of the rational critical thinking mind. And in that perceiving mind is able to pick up more information. Right. And it's going to send you insights and, signals. And so at that point, you want to press pause on the mantra and allow, just allow the contemplation. And you may even also insert questions or imagery. And so this is the time to do that. So you can combine imagery work and visualization with contemplation.
Yeah.
But it would be separate than your mantra training. The mantra training strictly is trying to train concentration and mindfulness.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and then you could stack them. So you've trained your mantra for so long. Maybe it's 10 minutes of mantra followed by 10 minutes of what we'll call insight. Where you're going to really try to learn something new about yourself or visualize your future. And you do that
You know,
with a
it's
journal.
funny. I
right
just
there.
remembered I did do like a true visualization recently. So I got married about a year ago.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And so I had to give this groom speech, and it was, yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's a stressful thing,
yeah,
right? And you
and
want to do it right.
and look, I've spoken in front of people now enough times, but you know, it's like 300 people that live closest to you. What do you say in that moment, right? And I didn't write anything down. All I did in the day, and this was probably 4 or 5 days leading up to it, was I just kept visualizing each person and who I wanted to say something to.
Oh, that's really cool.
And there were just probably a few key words that I had in mind for every person that I addressed. And then I got up there and gave this story, and then I went down those boom, 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 boom.
That's awesome.
And I tell you,
probably went really well.
Yeah, it was one of the best speeches.
You just described how I go about giving my speeches.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Someone asked me earlier, like I'm starting to do a lot more and more, and I don't like using aids,
Slides.
unless they ask for them. Like I gave a speech yesterday to a big finance hedge fund, and they wanted slides, and they wanted me to specifically talk about what we call the big 4 skills of mental toughness. So I gave them what they wanted. But did I walk away thinking that was my best work?
Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, no, because it was just it constrained me too much. But typically, I'll do exactly what you do. I'll visualize who I'm speaking to. I'll visualize the key stories and outcomes and what I want them to learn, and that becomes the structure. And I'll visualize it for a week or so before the event every day.
Huh, that's cool.
And then when I go give the speech, I'm very relaxed, and I box breathe before the speech.
I was so relaxed when I gave the speech too.
That's great.
I just felt like so in the zone for it. I just knew going into it I was going to crush it.
Yeah, you predetermine the outcome. You won in your mind before the incident.
Yeah.
And that's what visualization does. So when you visualize your future, you're basically creating a new memory that will draw you toward it. And then practicing it every day makes it stronger and stronger. Just like practicing a memory of the past. Like if you had a major fuck up and you keep on rehashing it, you're just making it stronger.
Now, how important is the outcome in your visualization? Like, do you picture people applauding and shaking your hand afterwards?
For sure.
Okay,
yeah. Yeah, it's positive, it's success, it's bright. You're feeling elated. It's really important that you get the feelings into it. You don't have to have like every single detail, or let me put it this way. You can visualize a lot of detail, but don't be attached to it happening that way. Because what you're creating is a magnetic force that's drawing you toward that territory, but don't expect the path to be straight, and don't expect it to look exactly like what you visualize. Like I visualize, back to the story, I visualize myself getting through SEAL training as best I could. I didn't have all the movies that they had today. This is by now it's 1988, 89-ish, early 89. I went to SEAL training, or went to Officer Candidate School in November of 89. I had one video, and it was the recruiting video from the Navy for the SEALs. It was called, the recruiting video was also called Be Someone Special, but it showed imagery of guys going through SEAL training and, really cool stuff. I watched it maybe 20 times. So that was that was like the baseline, like you said, with the Woof. That was my baseline. It was planting some baseline imagery. Then with that, I inserted myself, and I expanded upon it, and I added the emotion, and I also added myself at graduation day, and I practice it every single day. 9 months of this, there's something magical about this time frame of 9 months to a year. About 9 months into this, I had this overwhelming sense of certainty that I was going to be a SEAL. There was no hope, wish, desire. It was, I am going to be a SEAL. I've already done the most important part of the work. And a week or so later, my recruiter called me and said, "Mark, congratulations."
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got the billet to go to Officer Candidate School and then to BUD/S. And when I went to BUD/S, I had this sense that I had been there before, and I graduated number 1 in my class out of 185 chargers. Yeah, 19 of us graduated. I was number 1, and my entire boat crew was there with me. It was awesome, and I attribute it to the Zen training and the visualization, and then just the ability to drill into the present moment and stay focused on the right thing while I went through BUD/S. I still found it challenging at times, but not nearly as hard as my peers who were dropping like flies. Thanks for doing what you do, and good luck with the business. I look forward to following up and trying the Whoop.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get you on it.
All right. And if there's anything that I can do for you, I'll send you a book. Come to our training. You'd love to.
Yeah.
You'd love to participate in that sometime.
Yeah,
so we'll hook you up with that information.
All right. Thank you, man.
Oh yeah. All right. Well. All right. So check out the Whoop, and you're going to hear more about that from me. I'm going to try it out, and I'm really looking forward to that, and pretty intrigued actually. And if you're into that type of stuff, then I'm sure that the company's subscription plan might have a program for you. All right, folks, this has been a long one. Super stoked you're here listening. Stay focused, train hard, and do the foundational work. Right? Get back into balance, and then begin your daily practice, 20 minutes a day. Hoo-yah. Divine out.
Hey, this is Mark Divine. Thanks very much for watching the Unbeatable Mind podcast on YouTube. You can also find the podcast at iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, and unbeatablemind.com/podcast. Be sure to check out the new episode released every week. Hoo-yah.